Welcome, everybody. This is Pastor Dan from Cross Culture Church. We're excited to have with us again my co-host, co-conspirator, co-food eater,
Hi,
and
Dan.
traveler.
How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. We're here with Ralph Garay, and we're also here with Pastor Alessandro di Leonardo.
Leonardo.
Did I say that right? Did I say that right?
You're pretty close.
All right. So we're excited to have you here. Again, I pastor Cross Culture Church in the Raleigh-Durham area in North Carolina in the United States of America. And I'm here with Ralph. Ralph, go ahead and introduce yourself.
All right, Dan. Thank you again for having me. And of course, with the great Alessandro di Leonardo from Italy. And it's good to fellowship with you over this platform. Yes, I live here in North Carolina. It's a privilege for me to work with the Baptist State Convention of North Carolina, partnering with them in serving our church planters, international church planters here in North Carolina. And I served for more than 10 years now. God gave me the opportunity to partner with more than 30 or church planters that represents more than 30 nations, and that reaches to 80 plus languages that God brought here. And it's a joy for me along the way to meet and know Pastor Alessandro di Leonardo in one of the meetings and conferences. And we're glad to have him here with us. And Pastor Alessandro, would you please introduce to us yourself? Tell us more about your family and your ministry.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, of course, thank you for having me, guys. It's I think just the idea of being able to talk with other pastors and just to be able to kind of go over what God is doing in all over the world. For me, that's super exciting. So yeah, my name is Alessandro di Leonardo. Just a little bit quickly about myself. I'm Italian Filipino. Most people would never have guessed that. I was born in the Philippines. My mom's Filipina, my dad's Italian. Right after about a year old, my family moved back to Italy. So my dad's Sicilian, so he will tell you he's not Italian, he's Sicilian. And we lived there for about 10 years, at least I was 9 years old, and then my whole family migrated to New Jersey in the US for work reasons. And I've been there since I was since 2019, since we moved here. But a little bit about my sort of coming to Christ story, about why I'm here, why I'm a pastor. Pretty much didn't have any relationship with Christ. I did know who he was from a religious perspective. It wasn't until all the way into college where I was pursuing an engineering degree, and through God's divine intervention, I was able to be invited to a church back in New Jersey, as well as a campus ministry. The combination of the two, I was able to hear the gospel, accept Christ. And so I finished my degree, but I really already felt the sense and calling of going to full-time ministry. So I was thankful enough, though, even though I was a new Christian, the church that I was serving at, that I came to Christ in, it's called Praise Christian Church, Southern Baptist Church in New Jersey, Bayonne, New Jersey. They actually hired me. I was sort of like a pastor, but didn't have that title yet. But I stayed with them since 2011 as a worker until I think 2016. I became a pastor and then finally got ordained. And that brought me all the way to 2017. 2017, my brother, he is a missionary in Italy, in Salerno, specifically reaching out Italians, given that he's in Italy. We went there, me and my wife, who I met in the church. We went there to visit, purposely, just with the purpose of visiting. No,
Because it's
no
Italy,
ministry.
right? It's Italy.
Exactly. And I personally have only seen Sicily.
Okay.
Never visited anything. So we went there, an opportunity to go. If you know, Salerno is really beautiful by Naples. We go there, and forgot to mention my church in the U.S. My previous church was predominantly Filipino, Filipino American, and so the Lord has started bringing out my Filipino side when I was there. So when we went to Italy, we were absolutely shocked to see how many Filipinos were there. I wasn't expecting to see Filipinos. I didn't grow up with Filipinos in Italy. And so just simple questions, kind of like, are there Filipino churches here, this and that? To be honest, my brother couldn't give me an answer. He said, not that I know of. It's hard enough to reach Italians. So we did a little bit of homework with also the Lord impressing upon me and my wife. And so we've decided to do a vision trip in 2018. We had an intention of potentially being in Salerno only in that area, but a pastor friend of ours, maybe you guys know him, Pastor Jerry, also in New Jersey of BCI, he mentioned that there was a group of believers, Filipinos, who gathered every Sunday, but they didn't have a pastor in Cisterna di Latina, which is by Rome. And so a lot of Filipinos reside in this little city, Cisterna di Latina, because they work in Rome. I always use the example of it's like working in New York City, but living somewhere elsewhere because New York City is too expensive. So all the Filipinos live there and they go there. And so lo and behold, we went to visit it, and me and my wife, we both felt strongly called to go there. And so we took a year to support Raise, get ourselves ready, and then moved to Italy in 2019. In that time, we had our first child, Danasio. He is 2 years old now. And then during the pandemic, we are one of those couples who also had another child. And so we welcomed Annalisa in November of last year. She's 2 months. So we have a 2-year-old and a 2-month old.
So it wasn't because of the pandemic you had this child. You just happened to have the child during the pandemic. Is that right?
The Lord only knows, you know. Which one came first? But yeah.
All right. Well, Pastor Alessandro, it is such a blessing, brother, to hear your story, to hear your boldness. I mean, it's one thing to be called to plant a church or to start a missions experience in your own country, but to move across the world and do this is something I think that we can all be encouraged by. And maybe somebody that's watching, that's what God's calling them to do, right? Is to draw them to a place that they never even thought. Now, here's the deal. Like, eventually the three of us are going to have to meet in Italy, right, Ralph? We're going to have to meet in Italy.
We're going to can't wait, man. I'm ready. Yeah.
He's going to have to show us around for some food. That's really why we do this, is to explore food and possibilities in hopes that we get a free place to stay when we come to Italy. So,
absolutely.
So tell us a little bit, what does ministry look like, before the pandemic? What did ministry look like? You don't have to give great details, but just kind of the survey view of what were you doing? What did outreach look like? What did discipleship look like? Were there services? What give us a snapshot of what that looked like before the pandemic?
Absolutely. Yeah. So our church is predominantly Filipinos. That's who we're reaching. We're reaching the diaspora that comes here, the workers. Of course, it's not limited to that, but that's really what it looks like as of now. I only have 6 months of experience prior to pandemic.
Okay.
Really, that's what it was. We moved in 2019 of May. And so until the lockdown happened, which really started in March of 2020. So what did it look like? We didn't have a place to worship until, I think, August. We found something, a place to worship. So pretty basic as far as Sunday worship. We come together on a Sunday. The difference is, at least from my experiences in New Jersey, is that Filipinos here, they come to work, and they literally work from morning to sundown, Monday to Saturday. So Sunday is like the time to do everything, like chores, this and that. And then, so our services are a lot smaller. And then throughout the week, we try to meet as well. We have a Bible study every Thursday. We were physically meeting. And then personally, myself, I was meeting people for discipleship, and my wife doing the same. So that's the gist of what ministry looked like. We also have a youth ministry that meets every other Saturday.
Is there a place like where you meet those Filipinos? Do you meet them in their house, or is there like a grocery store where they go and shop, or is there like a park or a community?
Yeah, so there's a lot of avenues that you can go about it. You step out, you see them, they're there. They're integrated. This is I lived in Bayonne in New Jersey, which is by Jersey City. Jersey City is so diverse. I really feel like I'm in Jersey City. It's so diverse here. It's interesting because I didn't grow up like that when I was in Italy. Here is you see Filipinos, you see Africans, you see Hispanics. It's really interesting. So you meet them, in the market, this and that. My personal connections are there is a Filipino group here that I formed years ago to kind of help each other out. And I was blessed to actually have one of my church members to be a leader of that. So I was able to have a lot of connections with that. So a lot of it is just relational. There's really, because I told you of the time constraint, everybody just works so much. It's really difficult to kind of just meet them in like us hanging out on Saturday in the park. That doesn't exist. People are just so busy.
Now, is that true? Help me out, guys. Is that a characteristic within Filipino culture, or do you think that's part of being an immigrant in Italy? What do you think plays into that work ethic where they feel like they've got to work? Is it expensive that they've got to work to be able to make ends meet? Help us understand. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, from my perspective, coming from New Jersey and pretty much the years there working with Filipinos, it's totally a different mindset. But one thing is in the US, they tell you Saturday is the day off as well. There are people who worked, of course, but for the most part, Saturday and Sunday is the weekend. Here, it's not. That's not the cultures. Even Italians work on a Saturday.
Wow.
A lot of people get paid by how many days they work. So also, it's kind of that idea. It's tricky to answer the question about is it expensive? Most people work not for themselves. They are there to support family at home. So it's always that mentality, just an extra day gives me an extra paycheck, an extra way of helping people. Or they buy a house in the Philippines with dreams to go back there and retire. And so they have to pay, so it's a lot of things about that. But it is that mentality, an extra day, I can work, earn a little bit more.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Very different, like you say, from the States, who's more of hourly, right? Hourly worker, but there you get paid by the day. So if you work an extra day, that's a huge increase in your pay if you live life like that. So, it doesn't take much to realize Italy at one point was really a bullseye for the coronavirus. And it's pretty much been a majority of the time you've been there, unfortunately, right? How have you seen Italy be affected by this virus? How much has changed? What does Italy had to endure? For those that are around the world watching this, what has Italy had to endure, and what have you observed?
Yeah, so outside of China, where at least in the news outlet, that's where it started. Italy was the second one outside of China, right? That's where it really spread. It was around March. I keep tabs with the US, given that I have family there and this and that. So I kind of know what's going on. It was total shutdown here. I mean, the first thing that affected people emotionally. It's interesting to say, I'm young, so I've never been, I don't know what, I don't have that many experiences under my belt, but I really felt like it was like a war zone during the March area. I mean, it was just total lockdown. There was even a sense of fear that like if you go out for the wrong reasons, you could get a ticket or you could get reprimanded or something like that by the cops. You had to go outside, carry a certificate to say why you're outside. It's kind of interesting. So it was really a scary moment. So that's one of the emotional way it affected people. It also affected people economically. Italy, I mean, the reason my family migrated out, and that was when I was 9 years old, was because Italy went into a depression, or at least the economic depression. It never fully, out of all of Europe, it never fully went up. It was getting there. And then with this virus, Italy, I think majority of income comes from tourism and having all these borders closed. I mean, to this day, everything's still closed. I mean, you could... US is still not allowed. Canada, the major groups, China, are still not allowed to come to Italy to this day. And so a lot of our workers, so the typical jobs that our Filipinos have is they work for individuals, and they clean their houses, or they we call them badante. They're pretty much babysitters like that, taking care of people. The second major jobs is working for hotels or restaurants, and all of those are shut down. So a lot of people I know have just lost jobs, and so economically has really affected people. And then I would say the last one is we're just like Filipinos, we're very relational. Italians are, and to the point that in Christmas we were only allowed to invite two people, and so that was an exception. Before, no one was allowed to come to your house, not even family members. When the lockdown from March to July, nobody was allowed to come to your house. It just wasn't allowed. Only people who lived there, and so we didn't see faces at all.
So during that time, did you, within your church, and I know the church was only 6 months old, and probably half of that time is trying to reorient yourself that now you're living in Italy, right?
Yeah.
So did you get resistance and pushback from people within your church saying this is overdue, this is ridiculous, we're not going to listen to this, let's continue to march forward and ignore these regulations and rules? Did you get any sort of feedback from or kickback from that?
No, luckily I didn't. It's so interesting. By saying 6 months, it sounds so short, but we really bonded fairly quickly. That when the shutdown happened, people just understood. Obviously the government shut us down, but there was no pushback. People were understanding. There was really incredible. People were, at least in our congregation, people were understood that this was a serious thing, and so we didn't have any sort of setback in that area.
Pastor, what do you think is the difference between Italy, the culture in Italy, and also the culture in the U.S. in terms of its response to, government's mandate as far as protocols, to protect one another, wear masks, wear gloves, or, all this. It seems like, as you describe it, people in Italy were easy to obey what the government has mandated. But it seems here, you also know in America, because as you said, you're updated. It seems like people here are divided. They have their own opinion, and they do what they think was right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, as we were going through this in Italy, I already was saying once this hits US, it's gonna be different. There's no way you could tell people you have to stay home. It's just you can't, and so I already knew that. It's interesting because Italians are not necessarily, like I'm gonna follow the rules, and you saw a lot of people breaking the rules, but overall, there is sort of this idea that you better listen or else you're in trouble. So yes, you could have like sort of that oddball as opposed to, we had very small groups of people who went against the whole idea of wearing a mask. Very small. Suppose in the U.S. there was there's still large groups who don't want to do that. So you just don't have as great as momentum happening in Italy. Also, Italy's one of the reasons that Italy was affected really bad, at least they think, is because population-wise, the demographics, the age group, people are old here, are older. And so, these are the kind of people that were mostly affected. A lot of the older people died. And so they just, people seeing that, maybe they said, hey, this is something worth listening to.
So that's so interesting. So you described Italy as having more of an older population. I've never, again, coming from the States, one of the beautiful things about what we're doing here is we're exposing ourselves to culture around the globe that we'd never get an opportunity to do. And you even said we can't even do right now. Not even me and Ralph can sneak ourselves in. And that's quite disappointing given all the wonderful food that awaits us in Italy. But that's so interesting that the population is older. So are you seeing an influx into younger people moving into the country? Because, as the population grows older, there's going to be more and more opportunities for younger generation to fill some of those workloads and that sort of thing as they get older. I know that's not a typical question a pastor answers, but what do you see happening sociologically, in the country over the next 25 years?
Yeah. So again, this is from my limited understanding.
Right. You're not speaking for all Italians, right?
Even just as an Italian, I was asking that question. You do see a lot of, so for one thing is jobs are very limited. I have cousins who graduated from college, were from Sicily, who had to go all the way up north to find a job just because there's really no jobs. The further south you go, they're just, we're by Rome. So it's like really the center. And so starting up is where you start seeing jobs. So even that, you just don't see people, taking on jobs, like this idea of more people moving into the city. I did read that because of the pandemic and the fact that now Italy is more receptive to the idea of online work, people started moving out back into the country, where before it was, you had to work into the city. We did see that. One cool thing I did see growing up here or coming back and visiting is the jobs are so scarce that kids have to work for their parents or with their parents. So you see this apprenticeship happening, which I rarely saw in the U.S. You're doing following your dreams, not my dad's dream, not my mom's dream. Here it's kind of like, hey, I'm glad I have a job. My dad did this, my grandfather did this. I have to do it. I can't find anything else. You do see this kind of cool apprenticeship. Who knows what's going to happen here in Italy? In Italy, there is a population deficit as far as Italians. I mean, we're just not populating, and that's a huge problem in a lot of Europe. I don't know exactly which countries, but Italy is one of them, where we're just not making enough babies. I mean, people are not getting married, and Italians are just not making enough. If ever, they make one child.
Wow. Well, you're doing your part. You've got two.
Yeah.
You're doing your part.
And we thank you for doing your part and for spreading our genes there. Thank you.
Especially to your wife, who had to endure, much pain to continue that population spread. So how has the church shifted, from in-person discipleship, you doing a lot of that one-on-one discipleship, to now you can't in person. How has the church shifted in such a young infancy? It's kind of had to take on a new form. What does that look like now?
Yeah, so currently we're doing online services. We did have a small gap where we were able to go back to our place of worship. It was August to October, and that's where the spike came back up. And so we felt we needed, our place was really small. We could fit about 30 people, but I mean, you really had to squeeze them in. Yeah. We no longer have a place of worship. We let it go. It was just money out, it's just we were paying for something we weren't using. Wow. And so we decided to let it go. So as of now, we don't have a place of worship. So we're doing everything online. We do everything online. I mean, except for that August to October where we could meet, everything still stayed online. Now it's a little bit more laid back than it was when the lockdown. Italy is really avoiding a lockdown because it really destroyed people, like I mentioned earlier. So now I could still see people. I go out more often. I could try to do ministry here and there. I'm allowed to have 2 people a day in my house. I could go visit people. So that's what it looks like. But everything is online, from the youth ministry to our services. I would say, of course, those are not happy things. We loved meeting physically. I would say, though, that one thing that I would have never done prior to the pandemic, but was forced to do, which I probably will continue after the pandemic, is discipleship online. I mean, that works perfectly. People, they can't say they don't have time. I mean, give me just an hour. I don't care when, just give it to me and we'll meet. And so prior to my daughter being born, I was just discipling everyone in my church. People just had the time. People made the time because it was all online. It wasn't like we have to meet, we have to find a location, this and that. It was so the online aspect is really great as far as discipleship.
What do you think are the changes in the ways and mindset of people as a result of COVID in terms of looking at church life and ministry? So like for example, before COVID, so I would probably be speaking in the context of America. We are so Sunday centric, everything like revolves on Sunday, like that's the highlight, that's ministry. And then and anything that happens Monday to Saturday, those are lesser ministries. That's not the highlight. Sunday is the highlight. The preaching of the pastor is the highlight. The worship band is the highlight. And anything happens outside that are secondary. But now with this COVID and through virtual technology, it seems like the day is changing because ministry happens anytime, any day, and also with anybody, and not just in the context of where you are located. It expanded, it crossed continents. It
Yeah.
becomes global. So how does that change the mindset of the people that you are ministering in terms of looking at fulfilling the Great Commission?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, at least from the idea of it's so hard to kind of looking at it, because Sunday's still the center, in the sense that that's when their day is off, and so they know that's when we're going to meet. If I do meet people, we do meet every Thursday at night, and that was happening before. So as far as scheduling, still things still look the same. I don't think necessarily that people are, at least in my context, in my church, I don't think people are connecting with other churches to see, their services. Oh, there's a conference. I just don't see that happening. I don't, at least no one's telling me like, oh, I was able to hear this message, this and that, as opposed to, I know I'm doing that. From a personal level, I'm putting my foot wherever I can, if I can, because it's just unbelievable what you could do. But I don't see my church doing that. So as far as that aspect, I don't see a change. I tried and I am trying to bring that global aspect to our services. So one of the great things we were able to do is we did a joint service twice, or maybe 3 times, with a church in the U.S. So that's awesome, right? And
Wow.
so
Wow.
that was pretty cool.
So let me pause you there. What did that look like? So you worked with a church that's in the U.S. and you did a joint service while you're in Italy. How did that happen? What did that look like?
Yeah. So given that I'm in New Jersey, or I was in New Jersey, that's the sort of, almost everybody I know is New Jersey or Pennsylvania. That's a 6-hour difference. So it's not a huge gap. Right now we're a 6-hour difference. So we used to have services at 4:30 in the afternoon. And so that worked perfectly because their service is at 10:30. And so we just had to coordinate. I'm in contact with a lot of pastors in the US just for friendship purposes. And so one of the pastors suggested, hey, why don't we do one? And once I did one, I asked another one. And so that's how it ended up happening.
So did one lead worship, another teach? Like, what was the format of that global? So I love the idea. I absolutely love it. And I'd love to even incorporate that across culture. What was the format? What was the experience like?
Yeah. So it depends on the church. So we did it with only 2 churches. I think one church we did it twice. One church is a small church, a little bit bigger than ours. With that one, we were able to completely divide sort of roles, where I preached, he had someone give a testimony. We really went down, me and him met twice, I think, online, to be able to really say, okay, who's doing what, this and that, how can we, this is how I do my service. That was a pretty cool experience. With the bigger church, it was more kind of like, we just raised our hands, we're here. We're still part of it. They showed we presented a video, so they were able to see it, but it was as if we were the participants. That idea. It was just that their church is so large that a lot of their members are participant as well, and so we were just additional to that. So depending on the church, with the larger one, participant; with the other one, it was really half and half.
Did you guys use Zoom? Is that how
Yeah.
you communicated? So it was through Zoom.
Yeah, and something I forgot to mention: we do our services in English. I know Italian, but I don't know Tagalog. I am trying to learn. It's just that's the Filipino language. Recently, since well, not that recently, but probably since October or September, I started doing something different where I actually preach in Italian followed by English, where I translate myself, and so doing it that way, because we do have we really are working with three languages, and unfortunately, I don't know Tagalog. So there's people who understand Tagalog better, but they know English, very little Italian. Then there's the younger people who only know Italian. They could understand English a little bit. So I was losing some of the younger people, and so I said, let me do it in Italian, followed by English. So I'm at least able to. I think with that net, I'm able to grab everybody. And so that's how we're doing it.
Well, it sounds like we need to be praying for God to raise up somebody that that is Filipino, that knows the language, that could come alongside of you. And what an opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, amen.
Ralph speaks the language somewhat well, right? Ralph, you have some experience.
Grazie.
Yeah.
And Italy is our favorite, right? It's one of our favorite country to visit, and of course Rome, and of course many other places we haven't been there. But it's interesting. But I'm just curious, like in the context of disciple making and evangelism. So before COVID, a Sunday centric, or as not necessarily the Sunday day, but the worship service centric church invites people to their worship service and just kind of introduce them to what their church is all about, and then they accidentally would hear the gospel if the preacher would share the gospel, or if there's a group of friends there that they would be able to get connected. Now, in the context of this pandemic, being virtual, disciple making and equipping Christians that God has brought into your life, how does it look like now in terms of these Christians evangelizing and also discipling their friends? How is that? How does that look like?
Yeah, no, again, another great question. So we were here for 6 months prior to the pandemic. And of course, any missionary, you come with a mindset, this is what we're going to do. So really, when the pandemic hit, it kind of became like, would this have looked like this if the pandemic didn't hit? You don't know, because I was still, at least for my part, I was still trying to figure things out before the pandemic. So how we're doing things, everything's different here, where places are smaller. So the idea of like saying, I'm going to invite 300 people, it just doesn't work like that. So a lot of it is just, hey, someone's having a birthday party, let's go there. Of course, now those things are not allowed. So a lot of it is honestly just, we focused on 2020. A lot of it was focusing within the church, which was great because we're a started up church. So we started really saying, okay, we want to make sure that every single member gets discipled. And in a way, we got to that. We had 4 people come to Christ in 2020, which was unbelievable. And it was all just through relational. Like, we were focusing on the people within the church, and then hearing the people that were kind of attending, they started to attend maybe because they had more time, and eventually through discipleship came to Christ. So we haven't done any major outreach because of the difficult of just being able to be with people. The only biggest outreach we did was before the lockdown, which is, it's really a year from now. A year ago was Valentine's Day. We invited all the youth. We had a big party with evangelistic message. That was great. And then in August, when kind of the lockdown disappeared, everybody was going to the beach. We had a big event, and that was also sort of like an evangelistic outreach. Apart from that, it's been, who do you know? Somebody needs help. For example, just a month ago, we knew a Filipino family who got contracted with the COVID. We got on it right away. We bought them groceries, this and that. I mean, now they know that we exist. Like, the church, there's a church there, a Filipino church, and then another group as well. So it's really just trying to be the hands and feet of Christ whenever we can.
I think you said something
amazing.
very, I think you said something in passing that I just want to revisit quickly here. You talked about 4 people came to Christ in 2020. Absolutely phenomenal. I mean, that is something to celebrate. That is a huge win. Obviously, you may even have planted and watered, but it was ultimately God who brought that increase. But we celebrate that. But you mentioned that it happened through discipleship, that you were meeting with them already and engaging with them. It wasn't like they heard this sermon and all of a sudden they came up, Pastor Alessandro, you're an amazing teacher. We want to come to faith, right? You were already trying to disciple them. And in that discipleship, they came to faith. So even before they came to faith, you were discipling them, which I've always said is a huge deal, because the prosperity gospel is discipling people even before they come to faith, because you already have this understanding that God's going to meet your every need and give you all these amazing things. So just share with us, that strategy of discipling. And sometimes I'm sure you're discipling people, you don't know where they are until you get into a discipleship relationship. What did that look like? Where did that come about? I see that as something, Ralph, that can also be adapted here in the States.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. I'm a firm believer that discipleship is teaching. And I guess if you're being theological about it, like at what point do you become a disciple? The moment that you accept Christ. We're doing the action of discipling, whether that person is a believer or not. And so we're making disciples. But of course, until that person accepts Christ, then they're an actual disciple of Christ. But so we're doing the action of discipleship. So yeah, I encourage people to disciple people prior to their, that's really discipleship it's our strategic evangelism action. And all of them came to Christ through discipleship. Nobody came to Christ through a message during a Sunday service. All of them through there. I don't assign people who disciples who. I encourage people, but certainly it's beautiful to see this idea that, if I know you're not a believer, I'm going to just teach you what I know, not just necessarily gospel sharing, but the life of a Christian, because all of that ties in, and eventually the person realizes, this is what it means to be a follower of Christ. A lot of people, I mean, one lady specifically who was attending our church, I just never had the chance to really sit down with her, and she just was always attending the church. And it came to the point that we were going to baptize people because the lockdown was over. And so I said, of course, I'm not going to baptize you until I sit down with you, this and that. And I wasn't planning to, I spent about 3 hours with her explaining the gospel, and she accepted Christ that day because she clearly did not know the gospel, clearly. But afterwards, she knew it. And then the next day I messaged her, threw a couple of questions just to make sure she got it, and she did. And so it was pretty awesome. So that's just like one of the stories.
Because in an effort to get more, chinks on our armor or numbers, especially doing what you're doing, to be able to report back to maybe some givers and all that for your ministry, it looks good to produce numbers, right? And say, look at all these people that are coming to faith. But if it's not genuine, right? If they don't have an understanding, he says, no man builds something and doesn't count the cost and understand what it's going to take. That's what we should all do before we come and follow after Jesus. Do you use a curriculum, or is it really person by person based?
So I would love to be that kind of person who is curriculum minded, had all these, this is who I want to be. It's not what God made me to be. So I only operate to the degree God has made me. So ideally I would love to have like, this is the book we use, this and that. But it's been really based on where people are at. For the most part, everyone I've discipled copies everything. Someone taught it to me. They teach the same thing, and so it's sort of that thing. But we're not necessarily. I took what I thought was the greatest, and here this and that, and then sort of that's the curriculum. But really, I don't have one. I do think a curriculum could be useful, and I'm thinking of eventually going with something to be more organized, but as of now, no.
Right. Well, that's incredible.
Now, that's very interesting. Like, for example, we've heard a lot of gospel presentation, Evangel Cube, Four Spiritual Laws, The Bridge, Three Circles, all that. Have you used those two in terms of, just equipping them but in their context, they can use anything that works as they sense what the Holy Spirit wants them, to speak at that time. Are those also tools that you have used before, or?
Yes. So where the school I went to in Stevens Institute of Technology in New Jersey, my mentor, there wasn't a navigators group. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the navigators. They're
Yes,
all
sir.
about discipleship. I think maybe that's why that's kind of hardwired into me. It wasn't a navigators group, but that's he was trained with the navigators. So we did use the bridge illustration, and then there's the Romans road. So I teach that, but I'm not that kind of person who's like, this is how they accept Christ. I've always been like, whatever works. Jesus used so many different ideas and ways of doing things. So I definitely introduce that to some people. This is the one I want to use this. I feel comfortable. I introduce everything I've been introduced to, unless I really think it's bad. So I've introduced Romans Road, the bridge to life, and then different aspects of that. Whether they use that or this and that, it's not something I push people. This is what we have to use. But yeah, I've taught to at least to the ones I've discipled. I've taught those things.
So maybe Ralph, this is such a bad experience. He's not going to use this experience. So
Yeah.
we'll just be watching your social media to see. Look, couple more questions, and then you're off the hot seat, brother. How have you grown? I mean, you've had to grow a lot as a leader. One, you 6 months in and a pandemic hit. Nobody could have prepared you for that. So how have you grown as a leader just through the pandemic, throughout this whole experience?
Yeah, first I'll have to say that I am glad that I had 6 months. I've heard stories just listening through the internet of people who the day they started to be a pastor is the day the pandemic hit, at least in their context. So I had 6 months. I can't complain. And those 6 months, a lot happened. It's just unbelievable. It was 6 months. So I'm not complaining with those 6 months. Absolutely have grown. I mean, I think there's two things you can do through a pandemic, either not grow or grow, right? And so I'm thankful that this is really, I saw it as an opportunity to grow, and not just me, just talking to other pastors, encouraging one another. Specifics, I think just realizing that this is a difficult time, and so learn to put away everything you had envisioned you were going to do and work with what you have. One of the things I put a lot of my time, which is super unspiritual but needed, is learning Tagalog, which is so draining. And then also Italian. I was telling Pastor Ralph before that I grew up here. My Italian is as good as when I left here, when it's just 9 years old. I've improved a little bit, but I still have a lot to learn. And so those are draining. So definitely learning that I came here to, yes, be the pastor, to provide spiritual insight, but at the same time, also came here to be a whole person. And so I need to kind of be there for my wife, be there for my kids. And these are the things that are going to allow me to stay here for the long run, as opposed to like, I got to make sure I get those numbers in. I got to make sure. So learning you're in the right place. This is not the norm. Just relax, work with this.
Wow. That's so encouraging to hear. I think we can all gather, Alessandro, from that to just focus. There is no book on how to deal with this, on how to endure it. We've got to look for those doors that are opening in our lives and pursue them, right? And use this as a time for growth. What advice would you give for leaders all over the globe that are maybe watching this? What advice would you give us during this time as we're trying to lead our, congregations or ministries or just simply share our faith and disciple people?
Yes. So from what I've learned, it's exactly the advice I would give. To put it into words, it would be, don't try to translate what you were doing before into, now, sort of like, okay, this is how many hours I was meeting people. Now I'm going to do that, but it's going to be all in Zoom. It's a different thing. Just the same way I came here from US to Italy, I'm talking to a person. but now I'm talking in a different language, so my brain is working differently. I'm more tired as opposed to having a conversation in the US. The same thing with this. We have, there's not enough studies to know how draining it is to meet online, this and that, to be 24/7. I was reading some of these things, connected. That's where we are. So kind of realize that this is a difficult time. So don't try to do everything you're doing before. This is, no one's asking for you to produce, crazy things. In fact, you might see a decline in church numbers, this and that, and that's okay. It's happening to all of us. You're not alone. Just see what you can be in control. God has given you something to be in control of, and work with that. Like in my case, I'm in control of learning this language, put it into use, try to do your best. And then, of course, the people that I have, as much as I can, be there for them. So definitely be content where you're at. You're not alone.
Wow.
Wow. That's a powerful word. Content, be yourself, and, be who you are as God shaped you, made you to be in this context. So it seems for me, the message, the takeaway I've got is, know God in this context and know him more. And that's, I think, in the exhortation of the Apostle Paul, that we need to continue to increase in our knowledge of God, not just in mind, but in experience in the situation where we are in. Then at the same time, be learning how to obey him in this situation. Just, acknowledging, I don't know what to do in this situation, but God, you know what to do. And please lead me and guide me and make me obedient, sensitive, discerning to your leadership.
Amen.
Thanks so much, man, for sharing that.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
this was incredible, Alessandro. You are an encouragement, brother, and there may be some watching this that are ready to step out in faith, and even during a pandemic, and see the nations represented. Would you mind praying for leaders and people all around the globe? But I want to ask you to do something. This is my one favor as you pray. All right. I don't know. Maybe Ralph knows Italian. I do not. But I specifically, if you don't mind, would ask you to pray in Italian all over the globe, but especially for your Italian co-laborers that are in that country, that are laboring with you, reaching maybe different people, different contexts, but that are enduring this together. Could you do that for us?
Absolutely. I mean, if they laugh at my Italian, that's on them.
That's on them. Let me tell you, me and Ralph will not laugh at your Italian, but most importantly, God speaks Italian too. So even broken Italian, he speaks broken English. That's what I speak. So absolutely. But if you wouldn't mind praying for us, we're going to be in agreement with you together, brother.
Amen. Dio ti ringrazio per questo incontro che abbiamo avuto con Pastore Ralph e Pastore Dan. Abbiamo parlato di cose che sta succedendo qua in Italia. La verità è che io sono appena venuto qua, allora non so tutto ciò che sta succedendo, però tu sì che lo sai tutto che sta succedendo qua, sai la difficoltà che stiamo incontrando ogni giorno, non solo per quelli pastori qua in Italia, ma tutti nel mondo. È una brutta cosa vedere persone morire, persone nella nostra chiesa. Non possiamo più incontrarci, alcuni abbiamo dovuto chiudere la chiesa. È un tempo difficilissimo, però come ha detto Pastor Dan, non c'è un libro scritto di che cosa dobbiamo fare, però possiamo dire la verità che c'è la Bibbia ci dice che dobbiamo ascoltare a te, ci dice che dobbiamo avere fiducia in te, ci dice che dobbiamo essere contenti con te, perché tu sei con noi. E allora, come ho detto io, questo consiglio per tutti, preghiamo che noi tutti dove siamo capiamo che la cosa più importante è quello che tu ci hai detto di fare. Non possiamo fare tutto, non possiamo essere Dio, perché c'è già un Dio, sei tu. Allora facciamo quello che tu ci hai detto di fare, lo facciamo con gioia. Io continuo a pregare per Pastor Dan e Pastor Ralph per le cose che stanno facendo, specialmente per questo tipo di video per incoraggiare altri pastori nel mondo, che tu lo usi per la tua gloria. E preghiamo queste cose nel nome di Gesù. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.
Well,
Wow, beautiful, beautiful.
it was.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you so
Pastor
much.
Alex.
Thank you for those that are watching. What a blessing Alessandro has been to us. I mean, this brother just started 6 months and has endured the pandemic in one of the hottest spots in our globe, and yet maintained the joy of the Lord and his centeredness on him. So I pray that this has encouraged you. For Ralph and for Pastor Alessandro, we want to thank you for watching. Be sure to engage here in the next couple of days, as we'll be in Cambodia and we'll be in London. So we ask you to join. Hopefully you're enjoying gospel or global gospel conversation. God bless you.